Hello all and welcome back to another video. I wanted to make this video because I had an interesting discussion with my younger brother actually over the holidays, and we were kind of, I don't think he had more of the technical aspects of it down, but ultimately we kind of had the discussion about happiness and kind of what I would describe his kind of position as kind of like a utilitarianism, um, which I mean, not that there's like necessarily any like there's a whole tradition on it. Obviously, that when you look at someone like John Stuart Mills and etc. But I kind of wanted to reflect off of that conversation and what I think it could be useful in the political filter on this channel. And so, what I think to just kind of get to the meat and bones of it is understanding that happiness is kind of reflected as like a political goal and ambition all around us, especially among really both political groups, I would say, especially in like the economic sense. Um, the idea of like a kind of like social welfare for the greater social good. Uh, it's been a long tradition going on for a very long time. But I think the problem with that, of course, is when you just kind of achieve like what you would call kind of that hedonism, that pleasure. It's obviously gonna make for kind of a passive expression, in that there's really no need to change any ambitions or kind of even go about any kind of like creative change. Most people just aren't like you're not gonna. It's gonna be very rare for someone, I think, in that my personal experience, that you'll see someone who kind of just for the sake of like without any pressure or anything, whether it's like health related or kind of some bad habit or some idea that maybe your friend is like, hey, that's a bad idea, and you're just like, whatever, and you just keep doing it, and eventually it festers up, and something bad happens to you, and then you're like, oh shit, you were right, and you have to tell your friend like, hey, you were right, and ultimately though, like, you change, but you rarely see like someone just like picking up for no reason. Like it's an event. There's something that happens. There's some kind of stress that comes along usually, and I guess that's kind of my point. Is not only is it kind of just, I mean, not to. I think it really is kind of interesting how it with something like the internet around, these kind of like old ideas of like utilitarianism that was written by like these English authors hundreds of years ago, with like the concept of something like the internet. And really, if you like, not just like, although we can and we will probably talk about that a little bit later, but when we kind of like took a look at like sexual kinks, for example, um, happiness can somewhat be acknowledged in that, like, that people are taking place in this for the reason of having some kind of pleasure or whatever. But within those acts, actually, when we look at something like being a cuck, basically, right? Like in that role that person is playing, whether you support it or not, I personally don't, but when he's playing the role of being the cuck, he's not happy in that moment. It's shame, right? Like he's like lesser than what the Chad alpha is doing to his partner, right? And so you kind of see this kind of almost like role selection, that yes, there is like this pleasure over kind of like on a two-tier level, as like I guess John might look at it from, if we're going to be as charitable as possible. But ultimately though, like when we kind of look at like our relationship with the internet and social media, most people see that there is I don't even think it would be a hot take to say that there's a problem with this kind of like constant hyper pleasure atmosphere that we have on the internet, where there's like this algorithm constantly going on around you. Everyone's always famously talking about how you can feel like you're totally alone, but you like thanks to your mobile device or smartphone, whatever the fuck, you could be like talking to yourself, and all of a sudden you'll have like an ad or something that pops up, and it's from something that you just like were like speaking out loud or something. Like the algorithm like constantly takes you down this road of like kind of business transactions and stuff like that, and just this constant gratification when and I think kind of almost like an obsessive component to it, right? Like when people find like something new on the internet, at least for me, you kind of get super interested into it, right? Like here on YouTube, I've been uploading almost every chance I've been getting lately. You kind of start to get consumed by it, almost like on a short-term level at least. And so I think you see that like all the time. And so in this kind of hyper modern time, just the concept of just trying to even assume what happiness would be in like kind of this abstract sense is just like totally, like we could just totally like toss that aside, and kind of like the legalese and bureaucracy of what that even entails. I gotta get some water in. But more than that, I kind of also wanted to talk about political mishandlings, when things go wrong in the political landscape, especially for like ideologues. And so if we want to kind of take it that happiness kind of pacifies you and ultimately doesn't make you kind of sharper, right? Like take big tech censorship for example. Like it's been demonstrated in the past how certain memes and certain phrases can kind of take on these different meanings that kind of can sneak through like the algorithm and like AI like censorship that's always going on. And it's almost kind of like this human expression against the AI moderation, because these tech sites are so massive now. Like there's no longer just some guy with nuance who can like see irony or anything like that anymore. It's all just in these like scripts and just these words and codings. And so I guess if you wanted to kind of look at it from a material example, would be like one of the things where you're kind of seeing happen with these stimulus checks and like drug offenders. Well, I said offenders, I mean users. But essentially, you're seeing a lot more overdoses than you would normally see in current hellhole year. And one of the reasons why is because you're, cutting someone like this, $1,200 check, or at least it was one time. Then it's $600. We might get this third one. Who knows? But you see, like, people just kind of pursuing that hedonism of buying a bunch of drugs that they otherwise would have never been able to afford, and cutting down their longevity, dying. And so I think, in addition to kind of just that obvious real world example, another example you would see, like, kind of culturally, would be like self-love, and kind of like this constant desire and need to make people happy. All these, like, processes that we see in activities, which I'm not saying, like, there's no I'm not trying to advocate for people to just be as miserable as possible, right? It's ultimately, though, about how you obviously need some kind of tension, some kind of force, some kind of friction to come along and kind of push you, even on a political level, right? Like this tech censorship that's just gonna make us all that more wiser, more cunning, more sly with how we're gonna deal with more dank on our memes, even. And so I think we should just accept these challenges for what they are. Nobody said any of this shit was gonna be easy, right? And there's no sense in getting blackpilled all the time. And we really have to kind of embrace the fact that much of the world is very against or find uninteresting what a lot of our ideas are, or even understand what we're even trying to do. And like I said, we should just embrace that for what it is, because when you get to that summit, when you're a part of this, like, journey, most of us probably aren't going to see this all play out, right? Declines and rises of, like, civilizations and stuff like that, happen over the spans of, like, hundreds of years. Like this idea, like, Rome just withered away overnight, right? That people kind of have caked up. That's just totally not true. There's just all these stages, and Spangler kind of pointed out, if you want to take a white pill real quick, a real fast gamer break, white pill check, for when you think of, like, the plant and the flower, there's kind of that rejuvenation, that kind of, like, rebirth, that regrowth, before the eventual, decline. But so this doesn't have to just be this, we don't have to just, like, take it. And who knows, when you kind of think of all the minoritarian cultures over time, and how they manage to somehow preserve or have their works preserved, that still influences to this day, or we at least, like, have have noted. And so who knows, maybe we will be looked back upon as starting some new idea, or new people, or new political structure that took maybe some of the analysis that people are offering on the internet right now, even, and use them to create some new truth, some new people. You never know, right? You gotta try, right? You can't just sit around and just stay black-pilled forever. And so I think, above all else, but I don't think it's just enough to just critique hedonism and just say it's a bad thing. I think there's some duality and, quite frankly, some even schizophrenic in like kind of the Greek like split sense to it. In like the drug addict is a classic example of the hedonist, right? The pleasure of just indulging in drugs over and over again. The drug addict is happy, right? Even though everything around him is just a total mess. You even see it with like homeless people willingly like choosing to be homeless, or the hoarder, etc. But you also have to wonder though about the hedonism or the pleasure of kind of the long-term gratification of what someone maybe like a Nietzsche would look at towards like the summit, and when you get to actually look over at progress that you get to see, and that in and of itself can be a hedonism. And then what about the hedonism of actually wanting to just participate when in kind of the momentum, in the force kind of concept of realizing that you have built this power or this force that's beginning to move forward. You're beginning to pull yourself away from the drugs. That is kind of a happiness, though, that I think is something that I really respect. In kind of like an energy sense, like what my brother's trying to get at, though, is kind of the intentionality of like happiness, though. And we shouldn't just critique these like legalese, like English liberals for kind of just having these funny ideas about like bureaucratizing like happiness, basically, and how silly that might seem to us now. But ultimately realizing that there is kind of that intentionality, though, of wanting to create some kind of like good like social goal, and we can't like just step away from that, and just to kind of like go on though about the duality, right? Like when I envision kind of duality, this is kind of more why I don't see this in like some kind of like just a simple duality, but more of like an actual like kind of like schizophrenic occurrence, and how the internet actually plays a role in that, and kind of the hyperization, if you will, of everything, the hyperpartisan, hypersexual, the hypercoomer, these hypersexual like orientations and whatnot. But how dramatic though they can shift. And when I envision kind of like duality in my mind, this could be, some people could have a totally different opinion of this, but I kind of imagine kind of like a flow, and kind of like the flows of a river or something like that, but with like the split, with like the schizo, and like the messiness of like understanding how even something like happiness can just be hyperized and made into suffering. And so I think understanding that we're not on this kind of like flow river course, but it's this mess, and understanding all of these concepts, such as like a political summit or a happiness, is like, it's not just like some achievement or some number or something like that. It's like a grapple. We have to, not only do you have to just try to get power, but you have to maintain power, and you're not going to find that in any other way, in my opinion, than kind of embracing the the hyper atmosphere that the internet has put us on, and realizing that there's only really like a kind of radical polarization or nothing. But maybe that could be an ambition for someone, or maybe even myself someday, is to maybe kind of calm that down, if that's something that people would be interested in. Yeah, that's something to actually really think about. But yeah, I think I just wanted to wrap up this video. I thought it was pretty interesting, and be interesting to see what people think. I appreciate everyone who's been watching the last couple of days. It's been a lot of fun. See you guys next time.